So I'm loving the show so far. I mean, it's kind of brutal at times, but one thing I really loved about it, and I think it's true of your kind of work, is there's a sort of sensitivity, I think, sort of running the kind of undercurrent throughout it. Can you just talk about kind of finding that balance? Is that something that very much comes in the writing stage, or is that something that comes in on set or on post? How do you kind of make sure the two can kind of complement each other?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think when I go through a sort of writing process or an artistic process, I always try to keep an eye just on the kind of human touch of it all. I think I was very aware that a show with this much kind of brutality and violence in it, without human context or without sort of compassion or heart, or the fact that these characters are in their own way struggling, that you could lose people. And I think I suppose I'm not really. I'm always just want to get to someone's soul. I think that's what interests me as a sort of writer. I think I always want to try and get to a place where you understand somebody's struggle and the good parts and the bad parts and the kind of melting pot of humanity that they have inside of them. And I guess that's just where I go as a writer. I just always want to try and get to the root of what makes someone tick. And I guess in this case, Reuben and Niall, they do some pretty horrendous things throughout the episodes, but I think at the end of the day, they are still human beings looking for love.
That's one of the things I love about your writing is it is very nuanced and kind of compassionate of kind of human beings and our flaws. They're never one thing. They're never kind of demonised. There's always in a kind of an intention, like you said, to kind of understand them. You said that's something you always try to do as a writer, but do you think that actually reflects your point of view just as a human as well, as a person?
I think so, yeah. I think we're, not to get too social political or whatever, but we are in a day and age of sort of like, really a lot of shouting and a lot of sort of finger pointing and arguing and stuff. I think it's forgotten that everyone, I think still, like, for better or for worse, just tries to get through life as best they can. And life is like an impossible game, and it's really hard. And people go through it and go through trials and tribulations and make mistakes and make those mistakes better than they do good things and bad things. And yeah, I think we sort of lost our ability to see the human being sometimes. And I always want to bring that to my work.
I mean, we've all kind of, one of the things that sort of struck me in this is we've had people like Reuben in our lives, perhaps not to the same degree, perhaps not as close to us as a kind of brother, but there are shades of that quite manipulative people, quite controlling people, but people that we still sort of depend on as well to some degree. I'm just interested to know why you think, in regards to this sort of relationship, I mean, there's a moment in episode 2 where Niall rings Reuben from university and says, do you want to kind of come? Yeah. And you know as an audience member, you're going, oh no, he's going to cause, but you feel like Niall knows he's going to come and he's going to be intense and he's going to bad things can happen. What do you think it is about Reuben that Niall can't seem to let go of, that he does still keep kind of gravitating back towards it?
I think what Reuben gives Niall is, I think Niall obviously grows up a very frustrated male in a lot of ways, and I think there is a certain, I think even from a young age, even if we zoom out from the show for a second, we're indoctrinated, or at least I was as a kid, in these sort of like the fairy tales where the prince climbs the beanstalk or whatever, rescues, I can't quite getting all of them fudged together and rescues the princess, comes back down, and I think I probably got that all wrong, but I think it's like this idea that to be a man you have to be strong, you have to be courageous, and I think that can be, and to Niall it's a corrosive energy because he wants so much to wake up and be like Reuben, to feel the energy in his body, the way people turn their heads as he walks into a room, even how he is with women, how he is with the opposite sex. But most crucially, how he just doesn't care. He doesn't care what people think. And I think what Reuben gives him is a validation. I think he invites him in episode 2 to university because I think he knows immediately, vicariously or by association with him being there, that he will fit in better. People will respect him more. People will like him more because he knows the big, cool, bigger brother, And that's why he invites him. And I think they gravitate towards each other because the opposite is what they're not. And I think human beings have the capacity to do that. They gravitate towards people who are so far away from themselves in a sort of idolatry sense.
I mean, while this is obviously completely different to sort of Baby Reindeer, I guess one theme that is it's mildly kind of similar for me is that kind of, not that these are the correct terms as such, but the kind of the abused kind of needing the abuser, sort of it's like that kind of trope to some degree. But one noticeable difference for yourself at least is that in Baby Reindeer you were playing more the kind of victim, the person who was maybe leaning on the person that was kind of causing them so much stress. And in this you're playing the abuser, for use of a better word. So can you just talk about how that impacted your own sort of in your home performance and the whole kind of involvement in this kind of whole show, kind of tackling that sort of that specific dynamic, but from the kind of opposite side, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of sort of like flipping the dynamics of sort of abuse, I never that never really like sort of wasn't like a noticeable change. I think what I mainly with Reuben was just like undertaking it was almost like an act. The pressure was felt, or at least the change was felt, in terms of just acting a part that was so fundamentally different to what I'd done before. I mean, it couldn't be more opposite if I tried, and I knew in order to have people buy me as Reuben, hopefully they do, I needed to change everything about myself, my size, my hair, my facial hair, everything, my voice, and I just needed to kind of change everything about myself. So that was mainly the pressure. In terms of like swapping the emotional dynamics around, that wasn't something I noticed, because every time I approach a scene, I just have to really know my like circumstances, where I'm at in the character journey, and just try to get into that moment, get into the headspace as best as I possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, you were pretty hench in this. There's a lot of muscle on you. I mean,
Are you saying I'm not now? I've lost a bit of weight, to be fair.
I mean, was there quite a rigorous kind of training regime to go with that? And I'm interested to know, did you, because things like that can be very addictive. People go, when people start running, they suddenly start running marathons and stuff. Like, did it something you can continue to do beyond shooting this? Did you find it quite addictive to kind of stay?
It was to a certain degree. I think the whole getting lost in half man and working to the extent that I do is an addictive thing. I'm definitely a workaholic, and I think like adding the physical side of it was really tough, because you'd be at the laptop next day writing, and your shoulders would hurt, your arms would hurt, and you're exhausted, and that it was a layer of pressure. It's not just like working out, it's actually dealing with like how your body feels the next day a lot, whilst you're trying to run a production and write stuff and do all that stuff, and that's really challenging. It is a bit addictive. I mean, since I stopped being, it's funny what motivation does, because I knew, I'm topless on camera. So every time I didn't want to go to the gym, or I didn't want to go to like PT, I would be like, no, you're going to be on camera, just go. And now sometimes I find a few excuses not to, but I'm keeping it up, but not as intensely. I'm stripping off a lot of the fat, because Reuben, I wanted it to be real. I wanted him to be burly. Like, I didn't want him to be sort of, six pack, and sort of, I wanted it to be a real body, like someone who is not hard because they're muscly, they're hard because they carry weight, and so I was carrying a lot of it was a lot of fat around my muscles, and that can kind of make you go, oh. So I stripped off a bit of that. I've ramped up the cardio.
I just want someone to give me a role in a movie where I've got to like be hench, because I feel if someone does that, I might actually finally do it. Like, I think maybe it would take someone casting me in a film for that to happen. But I wanted to ask about the cast. I mean, obviously Jamie Bell. But Stuart Campbell is wonderful. So is Mitchell Robinson as well. But I'm interested in sort of Stuart specifically. You're sharing the same role here, obviously at different stages of their lives. Did you kind of collaborate closely and have conversations about the characters and like to try and match certain mannerisms or nuances in their kind of where they're thinking, where they're kind of their demeanour, or actually in some ways was it better to detach yourself and allow both of the actors to find their own way into the character?
Yeah, well, a little bit of sort of everything. I think in a lot of ways, like, I cast the guys for a reason. I wanted them very early on. Like, with the second I saw the stealth tapes, I thought there's something real special here. And thus started my, very similar to the Jess Gunning process, campaign of convincing everyone that these were the guys for me. And I sort of... I knew they were special, so already they were bringing, a lot of stuff that I really liked. There was loads of discussion, like I feed into performances all the time. I'm always kind of feeding in and stuff like that. But there was two ways of going about this. Like you say, right, I'm going to do this in 4, 5, and 6, and you need to match me exactly. Or you give them a bit of freedom, because we filmed those first episodes first. You study what they're doing and pull interesting things out that you can maybe take. So it was a bit of both. I mean, I'm always, I get quite obsessed with like how lines, the sort of like almost like how syllabically satisfying lines can be, and sort of intonations and stuff. So I'm always constantly feeding into actors and stuff like that. But they brought so much, and I never wanted it to be this kind of like make it a cerebral process for them. I want them to feel it in their body, like think about this and think about that, and so they get too stuck in their heads. But yeah, it was a big old process, but I'm super proud of them. I think they're amazing.
And just very funny that, obviously, Baby Reindeer was a monumental success. It was one of those shows that just completely tapped into the whole zeitgeist. Everyone was kind of talking about it. Everyone was kind of watching it. I'm interested to know, when you have a show that is quite as popular and successful as that was, is that a kind of double-edged sword? Because obviously it must be good for kind of getting your next job's kind of commission, having more people in the room saying, yes, that maybe a bit more leverage, maybe a few more ears kind of on you. But at the same time, there is that kind of obviously pressure and expectation to follow what came before. So what's it been like following a show of that magnitude, I suppose?
Well, It's interesting. I mean, I think I had a choice after Baby Reindeer, like whether I was going to let that sort of fear in and be like, oh, I've created like this sort of almost like quite unheard of in this day and age of television, sort of like cultural touch point almost in a way. And do I sort of shrink and bask in that for ages and, I don't know, head into early retirement, or do I sort of get straight back on the horse and see what I can do? And I almost felt like if I stopped for too long to take that in, like I would become sort of trapped in a sort of stasis or a worry. So I knew the second I finished Baby Reindeer, it was straight on to the next thing in order to keep those sort of, I guess, juices flowing and just like keep testing myself, you know. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like the pressure that I feel from the outside world about following Baby Reindeer and whether the show will live up to expectations or not, it's nothing compared to the pressure I put on myself just trying to get a show as good as possible. So whatever happens, I can never look back on what I've done with Half Man and know that I haven't given it everything.
Yeah, well, you've done a great job, I think.
Thanks.
Thank you so
That's
much.
so kind. I really appreciate it. Pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey, you guys!
Hey,